Did you examine the exemplars collected from the police department provided by Mr. Groves?
Yes.
Did you compare the latent print to these exemplars?
Yes.
Did you compare this latent print against any other latent prints?
Yes, I used the ones that I had available at me at the Dutch Institute and also the ones that I had available at the UK.
How many of the latent ear prints that you compared against matched the latent ear print?
None. Oh, sorry. That I received. I'm not sorry. Excuse me. I'm not sure what you're saying. The ones that I looked over in the database. The only ones that I could actually find that matched was one of the defendants.
You said the defendants matched.
Yes, that was provided by Mr. Groves.
In your research and your experience, have you found any ear prints to be identical?
No.
And you said that your print did match that of the defendant?
Yes.
Any further questions, John?
Mr. Vanderlut, could you name, if any training or certifications within the United States you hold?
Not. I know that I speak on many kind of connections in this, but the military formal training here.
Mr. Vanderlut, is every part of the ear unique?
Can you repeat the question?
So, within class characteristics or individual characteristics, is every part of the ear unique to that one person?
Yes. It's like an upside down pyramid. Well, actually, it's a pyramid. Well, not upside down pyramid. So it starts out very broad, and then with each indication that you have with the lower class, you pinpoint and you can classify the different individuals.
So if we took a very not even within the lobe of the ear, is there some degree of similarity?
You're saying that within different parts, if I just have like half of the ear, if I have like categories of that?
Yes.
I mean, first of all, it's half of the ear. Simple. And also, if the ear is a placement involved, yes, and the way it's shaped is attached, there's many different things to rule out or specify, narrow down the individual belongs to.
Within your databases, do you have ear prints of people from the United States?
No.
Now,
besides the one I received from Mr. Ray.
Okay. Now, isn't it true that by regions, ear prints and characteristics can vary? By regions, globally, can't there be class and individual characteristics or that vary by region, that are more dominant in one area than another? No. Did you give any advice to Mr. Grubb or Mr. Miller on how to collect or take the ear prints?
No. I just received them and I crossed over all the information I had and I
Did you ever receive any exemplars from other people in connection with the case, or just the defendant?
just looked at them.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. No questions. Your Honor.
Hi. Next witness.
The prosecution calls hearing. Would you please state your name to the jury?
My name is Detective Erin Allen.
And what is your occupation?
My occupation, I am a deputy sheriff at the Cumberland County Police Department. I've been working there for 8 years. In the past 3 years, I've been working as a homicide investigator.
Can you describe to the jury your duties as a deputy sheriff?
Some of the duties that I take care of are investigating crimes, homicides. I write up reports. I make arrests. I interview suspects and witnesses.
And do you have any special training for the students?
Yes, some specialized training that I have is finding forensic evidence with light, cold case homicide investigations, and first response training.
Could you give the jury an overview of the role that you played in this investigation?
Well, I mentioned before, the overview that I played was I am the lead detective for this case.
And so, were you at the UCAM residence the night of the morning where the investigation began?
I was called to the scene. I arrived around 12 in the afternoon.
Could you just give a brief description of the inside of the home?
The inside, well, when I got to the residence, when I walked inside, when I first entered, there was the living room, which was on the left side. It was pretty much in normal condition for an average home. Nothing was out of place. As I proceeded down to the right hallway, the TV room was on my right-hand side. Next to the TV room was Tyler McCain's bedroom, which is the younger of the victim. The bedspread was on the floor. There was blood spatter on the wall closer to the window. Across from Tyler's room was James McCain's room, and I walked into the bedroom. When I first entered the room, I saw the victim on the bed. He was laid face down, bound. His hands were bound, his feet were bound with duct tape. He was naked. There was a tremendous amount of blood all over the head region, splats of blood on the wall.
Was there anything reported stolen by Tyler McCain or Renee Shaw from the home?
Yes. They had been missing one of their televisions from the family room. They were missing a boom box, stereo, speakers. They were missing a gold ring, some silver certificates, and also in the garage, James McCain had a light blue truck that was taken. And also his wallet was taken as well from the scene.
Have you worked robbery cases before?
Yes, I worked over 40 different cases, including robbery.
And were any of the items reported stolen recovered?
Objection relevant. Overruled.
Yes, 2 of the items were recovered, the truck and his wallet.
Now, from your experience, is it common for robbers to try and sell the items they steal?
Yes.
Was anything reported by pawn shops?
No.
And you say the wallet that James McCain was found, were there any credit cards missing?
No.
Now, is that common for a robbery?
No. Usually they would use the credit card, release the credit card.
You also say James McCain's truck was found. Can you describe how it was found?
The truck was found in IHOP parking lot, and the keys were still in ignition, and everything was. We also tested the truck for fingerprints. I did not, but my other detectives did, and there was no significant evidence found.
Are you familiar with staged crime scenes?
Yes.
Can you explain what a staged crime scene would be?
A staged crime scene would basically be somebody making it look like someone had broken in and tried to rob the place. As I mentioned before, the living room was in pretty, nothing was really out of sorts. And for most robberies that I've seen, people would, throw things around and go into different places. His drawers were open in the bedroom, but nothing was removed from any of the drawers. They were just open. They were still in perfect condition. Everything was set, so nothing was rummaged through. So in my opinion, I would say that it was a stage.
And based on this evidence and your experience as an investigator, is it possible that the robbery within the McCain home was actually staged to look like a robbery?
Yes.
Moving on, from your experience as an investigator, when someone is murdered, who are the usual suspects at the start of the investigation?
Well, when you do an investigation, you usually start from the closest to the victim, which is the family, and then you work your way out. And you go family, then you go friends, then you go anyone that has a grudge against the victim, and then you work your way out.
And what is the defendant's relationship to James McCann?
The defendant's relationship is was married to James McCann now, or was fiance. Or it was getting married fiance.
When did you interview the defendant?
I interviewed the defendant the evening of the trial, so it was the 16th.
And where did that interview take place?
It took place in his home.
And did the defendant say anything about what he knew about James McCann?
From what he had mentioned, that James McCann was just not an average guy. He worked a freight company. He was under 6 feet tall, 107 pounds. Was a good dad.
Did the defendant say that he ever seen James McCann before?
The only thing that he had mentioned was that he was paranoid that somebody was following him in his neighborhood. Someone was driving by numerous times, and he had felt that that was James driving by frequently by his house. So, but I don't think he's ever seen him.
And how did he explain why he thought it was James McCann?
Objection, speculation.
Oh.
The reason he thought it was James McCann is because
Moving on.
What's his name? Just another question.
Did the defendant take any action from looking at this person checking into his home?
yes. So when he had he had felt that someone had been watching him, he decided to seek out a private investigator, and this private investigator, he supposedly saw a license plate, and from that license plate he gave the license plate to a private investigator, and that private investigator gave him James McCann's address.
Did the defendant say why he'd taken such an interest in this truck parked outside his home?
Can you say that one more time?
Did the defendant say why he'd taken such an interest?
Objection. The defendant is going to testify.
Then he can.
Speculation.
Okay, he has that right.
Yeah, right.
Objection overruled.
Say that one more time.
Did the defendant say why he had taken such an interest in the truck parked outside his home?
Just that he was paranoid. He was worried that someone was following him. And previous to moving into that home, he had been burglarized before, so he was worried that maybe someone was staking out his house for burglary.
Now, the truck outside, did you talk to his neighbors?
Yes.
And could any of that information be corroborated through any other witnesses that you talked to?
No.
So would you characterize the defendant as being paranoid?
Yes.
Did the defendant ever file a police report about the suspicious truck?
No.
Did the defendant ever elaborate as to what the private detective he used to find the information?
From what he told me, the only thing I remember about the private investigator is that it had a red business card. He didn't know how he paid for the investigator, and not very much information had come in from the investigator.
And over the course of your investigation, did you find out who that private investigator was?
I did. I know it was a company called Red Handed Investigation.
What did the defendant say he received from the investigator?
Well, he had received James McCann's name and address.
And what did the defendant say that he did with that information?
With that information, he decided to drive by the house, James McCann's house, and drove by a couple times, noticed there was a broken window in the garage. So he parked down the street, he got out of his car, took one of his smaller flashlights, walked up to the house and looked in the garage door window that was broken. And he noticed that the truck inside was a light blue, and realized later that it was not the truck that he thought had been following.
And he said he knew that the window had been broken?
From driving back and forth a couple times, he had
what did he say he saw inside the garage?
A light blue truck.
Now, did he explain whether that truck was she found what she saw outside his home several times?
No.
So it was a different truck.
Yes.
Did he explain how he found James McCann's license plate though? If it was a different truck.
He did not.
Did you question the defendant on his relationship with Diana Coonsey?
Yes, I did.
Did he elaborate as to their relationship?
What he had said is that he wished they would never got divorced. He still loved her. He was really upset and depressed about the divorce.
Did he say that he was jealous of James McCann?
Yes.
Now, did he ever ask Mrs. Coonsey about James McCann?
Numerous times he would constantly be calling her and asking her what's his last name. He would ask his kids, who is the guy that my wife is seeing. It was making Mrs. McCain extremely uncomfortable. She was constantly badgering about it.
Did you have any knowledge of the relationship between Mrs. Coonsey and the defendant going into the interview?
The only knowledge that I have is from a police report that was filed.
Can you explain what was in that police report?
There was a police report that was filed that was a domestic dispute between James McCain and Diane, where he was at home and he shoved her into his truck and took his son's baseball bat and bashed it into their car.
Can you clarify for me? Was the police report between James McCann or the defendant?
Oh, the defendant.
So can you say again what the police report was about?
The defendant and his ex-wife, Diane, were at his home and he pushed her into his truck and took his son's baseball bat to another car.
Did you ask the defendant about his whereabouts the previous evening of the actual investigation, the night where the crime took place?
Yes, I did. He had said that he was cleaning his garage around 9 p.m. He had also mentioned that his father had called him in the morning, and after he cleaned the garage, he proceeded to drive to different hotels and try to figure out where his father was. He ended up at a Holiday Inn and talked to the clerk inside and tried to see if he could phone his father, who was staying at that hotel. He did not get in touch with his father, so instead he brought him belongings and clothes and such and put them in his truck outside of the hotel. That was roughly 10 minutes.
Did the defendant actually find his father?
No.
Now, was that odd?
I found it odd just because he spent pretty much the whole evening trying to find his father, and then even when he did find where his father's truck was, he didn't try to get that much in contact with him besides we were.
And what did he say he did after he left the Holiday Inn?
He went back home. He forgot he wanted cigarettes, so he went to some sort of convenience store, bought cigarettes, but he does not have a timestamp on the time that he purchased cigarettes. He doesn't know how he purchased cigarettes. We don't know whether it was cash or debit. It was obviously not debit because there's no timestamp for it.
Did he get in touch with anyone that night?
He had said that he accidentally phone called his wife when he was trying to call his mother on a payphone outside of the Holiday Inn.
Just for clarification, he accidentally called Diana Coonsey, his
Yes,
ex-wife?
that's
Okay.
right.
And instead he called his mother, right?
Yeah.
Did your investigation take you to that hotel payphone?
Yes.
And did that phone have a speed dial function?
No.
Does it have the ability to program numbers into the phone?
No.
So, did he believe that the defendant accidentally called his ex-wife?
No.
Can you think of any reason why he would call her and say it was an accident?
I believe that he tried to call her to make sure she wasn't at James.
Objection, speculation.
Can you say it again?
I believe that he called her to make sure that she was not at James' house.
Now, the hotel where where the defendant found his father, how far away is that from the McCann residence?
We calculated roughly 3 miles.
And at this time, Your Honor, I'd like to approach the witness. Do you recognize this document? So you were the author of that document.
Yes.
Can you explain what it is?
This is an affidavit for the defendant.
And on the back page, is that your signature there?
That is my signature.
Your Honor, I'd like to introduce into evidence prosecution exhibit 22. That is an affidavit that is signed by Deputy Allen in hopes of searching the defendant's home and vehicle. This document states her involvement in the case, the interviews that she conducted, and conclusions that she drew.
The objection.
Yes, she is objecting.
Sustained.
Okay.
One. Anything else?
Over the course of your investigation, did you look into other suspects?
Yes.
Was James Wickenburg, was the defendant your main suspect?
Yes.
Now, why did the defendant stick out to you as the lead suspect in this case?
The reason the defendant stuck out to me as lead suspect is because he had a motive. He was very jealous of the relationship that his ex-wife had with James McCann. He was close to the scene of the crime. Pretty much motive.
Now, when were you certain that
I was certain, well, we were all certain, basically based off the earprint.
so the earprint was more of a justification
Yeah.
for the defendant being the lead suspect in the case?
Yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Detective Allen, are you a therapist or a psychologist?
No.
Do you study human behavior?
No.
Have you ever had any background education in seminars, workshops on human behavior?
Objection, Your Honor, relevant.
Overruled. You have the bill.
No, I haven't.
So it's fair to say that you can't actually testify to why Mr. Coombs called Diana, whether it being on purpose or by accident.
No, but I can base it off of my investigation and my previous experience.
So it's normal as a police detective in an investigation to make accusations or speculation of human behavior.
No,
Well, I'm confused then. Why did you do that to Mr. Coombs?
because it was kind of odd that he called his wife, or supposedly said that he called his wife on accident from his phone, but you can't call somebody on accident, so I feel like that was leading us to, he was telling us not the right story, he was lying.
So you assume that my client was telling you a lie.
Well, you can't have speed dial on the phone, on a payphone, that's why. Because we checked it out and it doesn't work, you can't like pretend to call somebody.
So you can't accidentally, if it's on speed dial, you can't actually hit a 1 instead of a 2?
Well, you can, but how different is his wife's ex-wife's number compared to his mother's? I mean, they're pretty much different.
So, but I'm asking you, is it possible if it's on speed dial to hit
There's
a 1
no speed dial function in the
instead
phone.
of a 2?
There was no speed dial No, in a Facebook.
But you are not expert on human behavior. You don't actually know
I know what a
about
payphone
human
looks like, and I know you have to punch in the numbers.
I'm asking you if you're an expert on human behavior.
No.
And you're not a psychologist.
No.
You're a detective.
Yes.
What was your action, or what was your purpose on this case?
I am the lead detective.
So, being the lead detective, it opens you up to any and all information pertaining to this case, correct?
Yes.
And being privy to that information, you would be aware of other possible suspects, correct?
Yes.
And so, with being aware of that, you would be aware that Mr. McCain's neighbors had called in and said that there have been 2 other suspicious persons hanging around the McCain residence, and you were also, correct? So, and you were also aware that lead, per se, was not followed up on until a month later after it was called in by the neighbors.
If that was the case,
No, I'm asking you, do you know that? Are you aware of that fact?
then yes, I am aware of that.
So you are aware that Scott Nose called and said that there was issues with the McCain residence prior to Mr. McCain being
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay.
Overruled.
prior to Mr. McCain's death, correct?
Can you say that one more time?
Are you aware that the Scott Nose, the neighbor of No, N-O-C-E, that's his last name. Are you aware that he called in and gave a description of the suspects on the McCain's property? Your Honor, may I? Detective Allen, could you tell me?
Like a photograph, a drawing.
I speak up.
The man seen by Scott Nessel had a drawing.
So this is the sketch that
Was drawn.
was drawn, and you're aware that this is what this man looks like. Are you aware that this is the photo?
Yes, I'm aware. I don't know.
Well, that's not present.
I mean, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't know what he looks like, but this is my suggestion.
Okay. And does this sketch bear any resemblance to the description that Tyler gave?
I don't know. I don't have that sketch.
No, I'm not talking about the sketch that Tyler gave. I'm talking about the description Tyler gave you of the man.
I don't know that was really necessarily recorded.
But you would say that he does have long, shaggy hair, like Tyler said.
I mean, yeah, that's like not really, I don't really know. I'd have to see the picture.
So you don't know that this man has long, shaggy hair.
I do. Yeah, obviously I wish I could see that, but I'd have to compare with the other picture.
I'm not talking about the picture. I'm talking about the statement that Tyler gave. Do you want to see it?
Yeah, I'd have to see both.
Can
They
I
want me to
please
show
see it?
both sketches
Why
side
don't you
by
tell
side.
us what they mark? What mark is defensive witness? Where's mark?
Oh, I'm sorry.
You can do it.
Oh, okay.
Show them what mark. All right, where's defensive exhibit 1?
I apologize.
Do you want me to read it?
I'm sure you can read it.
Well, I don't know how I'm supposed to tell whether it's a Puerto Rican and is 6 feet tall. Medium build with black, dark hair to mid-ear, which mid-ear, this is past mid-ear, so technically it's longer.
Well, my client
So-
didn't have hair to his mid-ear, but he was
I know, but I'm just saying it's different. But I mean, I can't really base this off of this picture either.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Detective Allen, did you ever speak with the neighbors that around Mr. McCain's home?
I'm sure if I did it, I'm sure one of my detectives did, or one of my colleagues. It's protocol.
So you are assuming that somebody spoke with the neighbors?
And it's protocol to speak with everyone around the crime scene, definitely witnesses.
Aren't the suspects that were given to the detective, the description of the suspects given to the detective that spoke with them, aren't they similar, would you say characteristic, to the men who threatened Mr. McCann in his parking lot at work?
That's speculation.
Overruled. Ask the question.
Possibly.
Possibly. Were these men ever taken in as suspects?
Are they taken in a suspect?
No.
Any other questions?
Why didn't the other suspects have 6 exemplars done of their ear? Why was it just Mr. Coons?
Well, the main reason, as I mentioned before, is that the defendant had a motive, and these individuals did not. And he was, as I mentioned before, this seemed like it was more of a personal case, and then in that incident it didn't lead us anywhere it didn't lead us back to James McCain.
Okay. How did Mr. Coons act when you questioned him?
He was fine. He was a little nervous at times when we spoke to him. Later on in the beginning, he was fine, but further down the road, when we spoke to him later, he was nervous, he was worried. He was worried about his kids. He wasn't sure if he was, if everything was going to be okay. It seemed like he was a little agitated.
So you're saying he probably had a normal reaction. His reactions were normal to what was the...
I mean, I wouldn't say that was normal. I think he seemed a little suspicious because he was worried that he would be a suspect if he was looking for him.
Well, he was already a suspect, so
Yeah, I
why
know,
would he
but
worry
he was
about that?
nervous about it. So if he didn't commit the crime, then he shouldn't be nervous. He was fine.
Any more questions?
No, Your Honor, there are no further questions.
Fine, thank you, ma'am. You can come down. Any more witnesses for the state? All right, Brendan.
Alice Curley, and I'm a forensic anthropologist.
What is forensic anthropology?
Forensic anthropology is the study of the human anatomy for the purpose of identifying remains or finding cause of death of a person. Essentially, I'm the real bones.
What is your educational background?
I graduated with a bachelor's from the University of Kentucky and a master's and PhD from the University of Michigan.
Can you state any other qualifications?
I have written over 40 papers, everything from hair and urine analysis to radiography. I was president of the American Academy of Forensic Sciences, president and first diplomat of the American Board of Forensic Anthropology, and I have worked several high-profile cases, such as the Challenger Space Shuttle disaster, the mass suicides of Jonestown, Guyana, and the House investigations of John F. Kennedy and Lee Harvey Oswald.
How old are you?
72.
How many years have you been working in your particular field?
I have been working in my field for over 30 years, and I have been teaching for a little over 5 years.
Were you asked to testify in those cases you mentioned earlier?
Yes, I was.
Your Honor, I move to have Dr. Curley.
Absolutely.
In forensic anthropology and the anatomy of the ear.
See,
Here, object.
overruled.
Dr. Curley, can you describe the anatomy of the ear?
Yes, I can.
Would it help you if I showed you a picture of it
Yes,
here?
it would.
Just bring it over. That's appendix 3. That's appendix 3.
Yes, sir.
comprehensive closing comment over here.
Yeah.
All right, Dr. Curley. Now, could you describe the anatomy of the ear now that the jury can see something?
Yes. The ear is comprised of cartilage covered by a layer of skin. There are four main parts of the ear that I would like to discuss. The first part is the helix, which is the outermost ridge of the ear. The second part is the antehelix, which follows the path of the helix. The third part is the tragus, which covers the ear canal, and the last part is the lobule, which is the bottommost part of the ear, and it is just skin. There isn't cartilage attached to it.
What are some unique things about the ear?
One of the most unique things about the ear is the helix, especially the upper corner of the helix. This is where most of the differences can be found, whether there are scars, tears, bumps, earrings, striations. This is the area where they will mostly be found. The other part that is easy to tell is the tragus. The tragus can be circular, it can be triangular, as in this picture, or it can be ridged with two points instead of just one. And the last part is the lobule, where it can be either attached or dangling.
Have you had the chance to examine the ear print from this case?
Yes, I have.
Your Honor, I'd like to refer back to the prosecution's exhibit 14. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, just turn that, rotate that.
That's the way. What can you tell us about what you see on it?
What I see is the uppermost part of the helix, the bottom part of the helix, a little bit of the tragus, and a tad bit of the lobule.
But you're not sure because it's not complete.
Yeah, it's not a complete part. Again, as I showed on the very first picture of the complete ear, this part of the ear is missing, the part where most of the identifiers would be on the ear. I can't see anything of the antehelix. The tragus, there's only just that little point. I can't tell whether it's circular, triangular, and I can't tell whether the lobule is attached or dangling.
Can we go back a second? If I show you a picture of a dead ear print, can you tell the jury which parts are missing and why those parts are important?
Yes.
This is exhibit 4.
This is a much better ear print. You can see all of the helix. You can see also in this upper corner, it goes from inward to outward. The antehelix, you can see its defined shape, and you can see the space between the helix and antehelix. You can see the tragus, you can see that it is triangular, and you can see the lobule, which it is dangling.
What is your opinion on ear print identification?
Ear print identification has no viable standards or methods of identification.
So you don't agree with Mr. Gove's opinion that it is accepted?
No, I do not.
Have you ever come across any material that could verify the acceptance of ear print identification?
Not in the United States, no.
Do you know anywhere that people are educated on ear print identification?
No, I do not.
Do you agree with the methods used by Mr. Vanderloop in identifying Mr. David Koontz as the suspect?
No, I do not.
Why don't you agree with that?
I don't agree with how he applied pressure to the ear to try to make it look the same. We don't do that in science. We're not trying to make the prints look the same.
Is it possible to make two different ears look the same?
Yes, it is.
No further questions, right?
The witness.
latent earprint specific?
No, I didn't.
Okay. Did you compare the latent lift taken from the Quincy or from the McCann residence?
Yes.
Did you compare it to all of the exemplars?
I did not have access to all the exemplars.
Did you compare it to the exemplar of the defendant, Mr. Coonsey?
Yes.
Could Mr. Coonsey have made that earprint?
It is possible, but the earprint taken from the door of the house does not have, it's a partial print. There's not enough evidence to actually define all the parts.
You cannot exclude David Coonsey as the contributor to that earprint, can you?
No, I can't.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Anything else?
One more. You stated that the most important part of that earprint was not showing on the earprint, right?
Objection, Your Honor, leading.
Overall,
It was not.
what was the most important part?
The most important part is this upper corner. Yeah, just this upper corner.
Oh, okay.
If I could give.
What's the dinosaur looking thing called?
This is the antihelix. It is the curve as it actually comes through, and then it follows the path of the helix.
So, okay. Were you saying that was the most important part,
No,
or was the corner?
the corner up here.
And what is that called?
That is part of the helix. It is technically the upper corner of the helix.
Any questions, basically questions for that? Thank you very much. You come back. All right, next witness. Come on up. He knows who he is. All right, next witness. All right, next witness.
That's called William Sherlock. I don't need it. I don't need it though.
Right, next thing.
William E. Sherlock.
What education do you have?
I have an associate's degree from City College in Chicago. I also have 20 years of experience in the FBI with certifications in latent fingerprints and firearms and tool marks.
What is your current occupation?
Right now, I am retired. I am a consultant with many different groups, and I guest speak at certain colleges at certain times.
What do you speak on if you do that?
I usually stick with firearms and tool marks.
Do you have any experience teaching?
Yes.
Where did you study and what did you do?
Again, Academy of Forensic Science.
Compound question.
Virginia Academy of Forensic Science.
Give the question.
Yes. Virginia Academy of Forensic Science. I taught, again, firearms and tool marks and latent fingerprints.
Do you have any published works?
Yes, I have a published work called The Ear Impression Case.
Do you have any field experience with latent print?
No.
Have you worked with latent print in the lab?
Yes.
Or what is a latent print?
A latent print is a print that's not visible to the naked eye.
Okay. What procedure is usually used to make that print?
Usually we take standard fingerprinting powder, which is usually volcanic ash. We go over a surface that we suspect that a latent print might be in. From there, once we have the print, we usually take standard fingerprint removing, latent fingerprint removing tape, which is kind of similar to Scotch tape. And then we put it on the print, we lift it, and then put it on a white piece of paper, or cardboard, or...
How do you stay up to date with information on latent?
I'm on several different boards with latent fingerprinting analysis, along with firearms and tool marks.
Your Honor, I move to have Mr. Sherlock admitted as an expert on latent print.
No, Your Honor.
Allowed to testify, sir. Go ahead.
Is there a database for fingerprints?
Yes, that is called the Automated Fingerprint. God, that's horrible. The Automated Fingerprint Identification System.
Okay. How expensive is that database?
At the time of 1994, we had 114 million.
Who is included in that database?
Mostly, it would have to do with criminals, but some civilians are in there as well.
To your knowledge, is there a database for your prints?
Objection, Your Honor. An opinion by an expert who is not qualified to do so.
No, there's not.
So how do you compare prints with a database?
We would have, ask the question one more time.
How do you compare prints with a database?
You're talking about ear prints?
Any kind of print.
With fingerprints, we would put in an automated system, and that would pull up some similarities between individuals, and then an inspector would inspect the suspect and the copy that we got from the crime scene.
So how would you go about doing it without a database?
Without a database, you would have to select it from a suspect pool, and again, inspect with the naked eye.
In your experience, is there usually more than one suspect in an investigation when you're dealing with latent prints?
No.
How effective could Mr. Grove's method be if there is no database?
It is effective, but the fact of the matter is that there is no system, and I don't believe there was a big enough sample size.
Can you just point out how many points are needed to find a match with fingerprints?
With fingerprints, it could be anywhere from 8 to 14. 8 is generally the minimum standard.
And can you state your opinion of how good the quality of the ear print that you saw?
Objection, Your Honor. It's an opinion by an expert who's not an ear print.
I would say with low to moderate, low quality.
Is it with fingerprints, since you're an expert on fingerprints, if there's more than one suspect, is it possible that certain parts match for more than one person?
Yes.
How many cases have you worked on?
I do not know at this time.
Okay. Of the cases you know that you've worked on, how many of them have dealt with identifying the suspect with a latent ear print?
This would be my second.
What was your first?
I was with a case with Detective Ianarelli, and I cannot remember the name of that case at this time.
Have you ever in your career lifted a latent ear print?
In the lab, yes, not in the field.
Have you ever taken any courses dealing with ear print identification?
There is no standard for taking latent ear prints.
So
there's no courses, so no.
Okay. Have you ever taught any courses dealing with ear print identification?
Yes.
Which ones?
Again, at the Virginia Academy of Forensic Science.
Which your teachings were?
Just basically how to remove, how to lift a latent fingerprint or a latent ear print.
Okay. Have you attended any seminars dealing with ear print identification?
No, I have not.
Have you ever been a guest speaker at any seminars dealing with ear print?
No, I have not.
Did you see the example of the ear print on this case?
Yes, I did.
Did you compare it to any of the exemplars?
Yes, I did.
Which ones?
I compared it with Mr. Coombs.
And
I did not think that the print that was lifted from the crime scene was had significant enough amount of information about it that it could be positively ID Mr. Coombs.
Can you say that he was not a contributor to this case?
No, I cannot.
Okay. Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Is there anything else? No, you just wait.
Your Honor, recall Ernest Ham at this time. Please state your name for the record.
Ernest Ham.
Mr. Ham, what is your current occupation?
I'm a crime lab analyst supervisor at the Florida Department of Law Enforcement Regional Crime Lab in Jacksonville, Florida.
And how long have you been there?
Since 1980.
What is it that you specialize in?
I specialize in latent print analysis.
And where were you educated?
I received my associates in criminal justice and my bachelor's in sociology from Augusta College, and 2 years of fingerprint identification from Fort Gordon with the U.S. Army.
Have you published any articles on latent prints?
I published several articles in the latent print field.
What about attending seminars or giving other educational experiences?
Numerous seminars, plenty of presentations.
Have you testified as an expert witness prior to today?
Yes.
Your Honor, we would now like to move to have Ernest Ham qualified as an expert witness in latent prints.
No objection, Your Honor.
Mr. Ham, have you ever used earprint identification before?
Yes, I have in one case.
And could you describe that case for me?
Yeah, this case, back in like 1991, we had this earprint, and it had this, the person had a very peculiar scar on the lobe of his ear, and that was the only reason that we were able to match it.
Mr. Ham, do you know if earprint identification is generally accepted in the forensic community?
No, it's not. It's not generally accepted in the forensic community.
But you were able to use it in that one instance?
Yeah, because they had the mark.
As an expert in latent prints, could you describe for me how fingerprints are compared or analyzed?
Yeah, you take the fingerprint that you get, that you lift, you take it and you put it in AFIS, in the computer database, and depending on how many individual characteristics it has, it matches up with other ones that have the same individual characteristics. There's classifications for the fingerprints.
What are some examples of some classifications of fingerprints?
There's three main classifications. There's the arch, the loops, and the whorls. And so obviously if a fingerprint is an arch, it's going to match up with another arch.
Mr. Ham, do you know of any such scientific process like the one you described for fingerprints that there is for earprints?
No, I do not.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. In that previous case you were able to successfully use the earprint to make identification.
Yes.
The earprints have class characteristics?
Yes.
Can class characteristics narrow a suspect list?
A little bit.
Can class characteristics be used to rule out a suspect?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you examine the latent earprint listed in this case?
No.
No. Okay. Did you examine any of the exemplars in this case?
No.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Make sure you come down. All right, next witness.
The defense calls Andre Monassis as our next witness.
Manassas?
Yeah. Whatever. Y'all are saying it cleansing, so. What's his name? What do you want me to say? Monsons? I don't know.
What's your name, sir?
My name is Andre Mollison.
Mosen.
Could you please state your name for the court?
Andre Mollison.
Still?
Yes. Could you please tell the court what your profession is?
Right now, I'm a forensic consultant at Chicago Kent College of Law, and I am also a professional editor for independent writers.
Could you please tell us what education you have received?
Well, prior to earning my law and legal degree at University of Illinois, out of Kansas City precinct, I also studied pre-law and legal and forensics in Belgium, the country of Belgium. I've also received my bachelor's degree in forensic science at the University of Kansas City. I've also received my bachelor's degree of the University of Missouri of Kansas City as well.
Okay. Could you please tell us what you've done with your education?
With my education, I became a legal consultant. I studied identification as far as ear prints, fingerprints. I worked with computer forensics as well. I also wrote a few novels. I taught at University of Missouri out of Kansas City for 12 years where I received tenure. I'm also a part of the International Association for Identification.
At this time, I move to introduce Mr. Moensens as an expert in forensics.
He's accepted. Go ahead.
In your opinion, is ear print analysis a good way to identify someone?
At this current time, no.
In your opinion, what is the problem with ear print analysis?
Ear print analysis doesn't have sufficient amount of evidence, likewise where fingerprints do have at least 6 different points of contact to identify as far as whorls, loops, arches, or not including abrasions, burns, scars, tissue. We're talking about regular, clean fingerprints to select them and isolate them to easily identify, in which you only use 8 to 14 points of contact to and that's when identifying fingerprints. Ear prints, they only have, from my knowledge, 2 classifications, which is either attached or unattached from the lobe, and it's just not enough information or research to support, whereas fingerprints do have enough.
Based on your knowledge, is ear print analysis widely accepted in the scientific forensic community?
No.
And is this hesitation with acceptance due to the lack of identifying markers?
Well, it's a growing study. Even with fingerprints, it's only 78% accurate, which still leaves about 22% of those, in which those fingerprints that are accepted have to be in record of police records, whether it's criminal or civilian, voluntarily. Ear prints haven't really been established in the same file to, lifting prints and identifying a suspect. So, no.
Is there a certain procedure or protocol you follow when taking fingerprints?
Fingerprints, you can, it depends on whether it's latent or visible. It depends on what type of surface, whether it's porous or non-porous, and different angles. With certain surfaces, you can use other prints outside. You would have to use casting, or if it's at a hard to reach surface, you can do an electromagnetic static dust print lift.
To your knowledge, is there any protocol for ear print identification?
No, not at this time.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Your witness.
Mr. Moses, are you a medical doctor?
Excuse me?
Are you a medical doctor?
No, I'm not.
Okay. Have you worked on a case with ear prints before?
Me, not personally, but I have researched a few.
Okay. Now, did you see the ear print of the McCann case?
Reviewed a quick glance of it.
Now, did you actually see the print, or did you see pictures of the print?
I saw the picture of the print.
Can you say when and where you saw the print?
I saw the print. I reviewed the case. I was asked to go over and see if there was a sufficient amount of evidence, a sufficient amount of the ear piece itself to be administered in the court. And which at the time I looked into the Ian Arelli case, which was worked, and it based off of the points of contact, as which we would do when identifying fingerprints. It didn't have enough points of contact to. So the answer is no.
You are familiar with the ear?
Yes, partially.
All right. Are you familiar with the variations between ears?
Yes.
Now, is it possible that 2 random prints of an ear could have the exact same helix, cavum, tragus, scapha, lobe, the parts of an ear print?
The parts of the ear print, it's not enough evidence presented to show that all ears are non-identical as far as no 2 fingerprints are identical, so not enough research supports that.
But if someone had an ear print that
Any more questions?
No.
Okay. Thank you, sir. You can come down. Call your next witness.
Your Honor, the defense calls Ramona Ducker to the stand.
How many more witnesses do you have?
This and one more.
Okay. You may proceed.
Could you please state your name for the record?
Ramona Delker.
Ms. Delker, what is your relation to Mr. McCann?
Jim and I were co-workers at Consolidated Freight Race.
Okay, and did you know Jim socially as well?
No, just at work.
Ms. Delker, could you describe for us the incident that you reported to police?
It happened about a little over a month before Jim died. We were both walking out to the parking lot together, and as we were walking, I noticed that there was this blue pickup truck with two guys sitting in it, sort of backed into their parking space. And as we got closer to him, the passenger got out, and he kind of leaned against the hood of his truck. And as Jim and I got closer, the guy said something to Jim, and I didn't know him, so I kind of stood off to the side, and they were talking. And whatever he said to Jim, it really made him mad, because Jim fires back with, you know, fuck off and stuff like that. And then the guy said something else to Jim, and I couldn't hear because I was a few feet away. Jim sets his lunchbox down on the parking lot, and he says, "Hey, if you want to get into it, we can go now." But I guess the guy didn't want to, so he just got back in his truck and left.
Did Jim say anything to you about the incident after it occurred?
He just I asked him who that was and what was up, and he just said it's a long story.
Had you ever seen those men in the truck before?
Actually, I had. 2 other times I had, we had a rash of break-ins in the terminal parking lot. So when I go out there to drink my coffee and smoke my cigarette, I kind of patrol around. And on 2 different occasions, I saw the same 2 guys in the same pickup truck in the parking lot.
And did you ever talk to them or approach them?
The first time I did, I went up to them and I asked them what they were doing, and they said they were just waiting for a buddy to get off work. And just to be proficient, I copied down the license plate number, and I guess they didn't like that because they immediately left. The second time, I didn't say anything to them. They saw me out in the parking lot and left.
After Jim died, did you turn over that license plate to police?
Yes, I did, about a week or so after he was killed.
And were you aware that the number that you gave to the police was the same license plate number that a Mr. Buckner had given to police in connection with this crime?
No, I had no idea.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Your witness.
To your knowledge, was James McCann aggressive?
No, I had never seen him, but I've only seen him at work.
Was he known to have problems with other people?
Not that I know of.
Did you ever see the 2 people you spoke of before ever physically harming Mr. McCann?
No, I did not.
We heard testimony from Renee Shaw, James McCann's ex-wife. She said he was boring and quiet. Are you saying that you know James McCann's personality more than his ex-wife?
I said I didn't know him other than just at work.
No further questions.
Thank you, ma'am. You come down. Call your next witness.
The defense calls David Kuntz. Could you please state your name for the court?
David Coons.
Mr. Coons, what do you do for a living?
I own my own business, David Coons Appraisals.
And Mr. Coons, do you or have you ever owned a red or brown leather jacket?
No.
Do you know who James McCann is?
I know of him. I don't know him personally.
So you have no personal relationship with James McCann?
No.
Do you know who Tyler McCann is?
No. Not before the incident. No. I know that he was the son of...
You have to speak up, I'm sorry.
I knew that he was the son of James, Jim.
So you have no personal relationship with Tyler?
No.
Have you ever been to the McCann household?
Yes.
Why were you there?
I was there to look inside his garage at his truck.
Did you ever go inside the garage?
No.
Have you ever been inside the home of James McCann?
No.
Do you have any idea of the home's layout?
No.
So you have no idea where the bedrooms are, the living room, kitchen?
No.
You stated earlier that you were at the McCann home looking in the garage. Why were you looking at his vehicle?
I had the suspicion that someone was following me or stalking me. Oftentimes I'd wake up early in the morning or real late at night and look outside and see a truck driving by, turning around, and it happened to be the same truck.
Alright, it was the same truck every time you saw it?
Yeah.
And did you feel like that those incidents had a connection with Mr. McCann?
I not particularly, but I felt as if they were. I felt as if I was being followed, so I assumed.
Mr. Coons, do you have any physical limitations?
Yes, I recently had well, not recently now, but I have had a vasectomy that left me with several complications.
And do you take any medications for your complications?
I take pain medicine for that.
Do you take any other medications?
Yes, I take antidepressants that I've been on for 6 years now, as well as tranquilizers and medications control paranoia.
And is it true that Mr. Timmons, a psychologist, said that your depression is not caused by you and Diana no longer being together?
Yes, he stated that my depression was based off of my failing business, as well as the complications that I was having due to my surgery.
So you would say that you don't have any vendettas towards Tyler or James?
No.
Is it fair to say that you have no reason to harm Tyler or James?
It is fair to say that.
Have you ever made threats towards Mr. McCann or his son Tyler?
No.
Is it true that you allowed the police to search your home and car without a search warrant?
Yes.
Is it also true that you waived counsel during your initial police questioning?
Yes.
Have you ever wanted Mr. McCann dead?
No. I really just wanted the whole situation to be over with, in order to get back to my family, my kids. I feel like the whole situation is tearing me apart from them, particularly Matt and Megan.
Thank you. No further questions.
Your witness.
Okay, you said you were in a lot of pain due to your surgery, correct?
Yes.
You have just recently moved into your house, correct?
That is correct.
Did you move yourself in?
With assistance from neighbors, yes.
The whole time? You
Yes.
moved everything in?
I did not move everything in by myself, no.
You were said to be seen carrying a lot of heavy objects into your house, like furniture.
Objection, hearsay.
Overruled.
So, okay. You were said to be seen carrying a lot of heavy objects, like furniture, headboards, dressers, such like that, by yourself, correct?
If that's all, that's not what happened, no. I don't think that even an able-bodied person could probably carry a headboard into a house by themselves.
Anything else?
No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay. Next, so you can come down. Any more witnesses? All right, ladies and gentlemen, you now be privileged to hear the closing arguments of the attorneys. The order of the closing arguments will be prosecution first, then defense. One each. What says the state?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to first thank you all for being here today to be part of the jury on this case. defense may come up to you and say that their client is innocent. They may say how he will live his life after this trial if he's found innocent. There's one man who cannot say that today. One man who's not here today. That man is James McCann. He is not here because he was brutally attacked in the middle of the night. He is not here because his right part of his skull was crushed into 26 pieces. He is not here because he was murdered by the defendant. And not only was James murdered, but his son was attacked in the middle of the night too. 2 victims. Hit over and over again. Tyler suffered a fractured skull. The defense has provided experts in the fields of latent print identification and of that sort. However, not one of them can exclude David Wayne Coons to be the prime person to have left the ear print on the door. Whereas our expert has linked him to it using the ear print identification. They say that ear prints are not generally accepted in the forensic science, but however, there's a time back in history where fingerprints weren't accepted either. The same situation in which we are now. Oh, one second. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the defense may come to you and ask, has the prosecution made my client guilty beyond a reasonable doubt? And if they ask you that, I want you to keep in mind the definition of beyond a reasonable doubt, which is proof of evidence that is clear or convincing. Now, we've proven that by having his ear print and our expert linking him to the crime. We have showed you today how the ear print on the bedroom of Dave McCann's door is David Wayne Coons'. You have learned today that David Wayne Coons was just 3 miles away just before the crime was committed. You have also learned that he has had a strong motive to commit this crime. Jealousy of the fact that another man has his ex-wife. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, when you go back to deliberate on this case, I ask you to keep in mind the evidence that has been shown to you today. And I trust in all of you to make the right decision and convict the defendant, David Wayne Coons, guilty of first-degree murder. Thank you.
Okay, what says the defendant?
Ladies and gentlemen, I think we can all agree that what happened to the McCann family is a tragedy. No family should have to go through the loss of a loved one in that way. However, what's also a tragedy is that my client, Mr. David Coons, is here with the lack of evidence that the prosecution is giving you today on trial for his life. Alright? If he is found guilty, not only will he suffer the consequences for it, but his family will suffer the consequences for it. His story doesn't have to end in a tragedy. You have seen the evidence today of an ear print. You've heard multiple expert witnesses say that this ear print cannot be viably linked to any person. Prosecution has also said that it can't be excluded. My client cannot be excluded, but maybe some of you can't be excluded either if we were to match yours up to that ear print. So that is not a viable argument either. You have also heard of a motive that Detective Allen assumed with no concrete evidence that Mr. Coons was jealous that his ex-wife was getting married to another man. You've also heard Mr. Kuntz himself state that his depression was not from his wife leaving him or anything of that nature. His depression was because he had a vasectomy which got infected and led to him not being able-bodied and not being able to work, so his business was going downhill. All right? You've also heard that an able-bodied man, that the man who is dead was an able-bodied man. You've heard from Mr. Kuntz that he is not an able-bodied man. He has not been able to work for some time now because of his injuries. Now, the coroner said that you would have to put intense force on a man to break his skull into 26 different pieces. Think about that, 26 different pieces for a man that can hardly get around at some time during the day. Now, I think we're in this courtroom to find justice. And if you find my client guilty of first-degree murder with the lack of evidence that you've seen today, justice will not be served. The only evidence the prosecution has is that a man is dead. There's no other evidence that can be linked to any person in this trial. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, these are your instructions. The defendant's been charged with first-degree murder, attempted first-degree murder, and burglary. You are to determine from this evidence what the true facts are. You will then combine the law that I will give you with those facts and give us a verdict that speaks the truth. First thing you do when you get to the jury room, you should select one of your persons to be your foreperson to lead you in your deliberations. A verdict is not a verdict until all 12 jurors agree unanimously. If you haven't agreed to a unanimous verdict by the time limit, we'll bring you out and tell you let you tell us what the vote is. Remember this. The highest aim of every legal contest is to ascertain the truth. Somewhere in the facts of every case, the truth abides. And where truth is, justice steps in, garbed in its robes, and tips the scales. In this case, you have no friend to reward, you have no enemy to punish, you have no anger to appease or sorrow to assuage. Yours is a solemn duty to let your verdict speak the everlasting truth. All right, take them to the jury room. All right, we've got some other jurors. Good. All right, we're going to stay in session while they're out and talk a little bit about what the trial was. The first thing in some of these trials, I've tried to run it just like it's court, you know, very serious, very stodgy, and a lot of times I see that the students are very nervous in the very beginning, and it takes them a while to get on their feet. So that's why I came in, gave you a little comedy routine, try to get you at ease, try to get you where you can go ahead and jump into the trial, because although this is very real, it's also very artificial in terms of how we actually do cases. Opening, Jacob, is that right? You were very nervous, and that's okay. I mean, that's how we learn. But you missed an opportunity to talk about how graphic this murder case was. Just get the raw emotion out. You did tell us who was murdered, beaten in his own house. You need to use other things. He was bludgeoned to death in his own house, like I talked about when I came over to talk to you. The ear print, you talked about that a little bit, and that's really your only piece of evidence, other than motive. You stopped a couple times and went back and looked at your notes and took time, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine. But in opening statements, you're supposed to tell us what's going to happen and then show us. Who did that in the segment over here? Okay. One thing that neither one of you did introduce yourself, I think, but you didn't introduce your team. You didn't introduce yourself or your team. All right. These folks up here may know you because they go to school with you, or because they're at the school. Got a verdict already? Okay.
No. Yeah, I'm trying to get the evidence.
Oh, okay. I figured they'd have a verdict pretty darn quick. All right, your opening. We all know what happened. We didn't know. We all know what happened here, but we don't know who did it. And you needed to make that the focus of your argument. This whole case is not about how graphically these people died and how brutally they died. the injuries, although you're going to hear a lot of stuff, you're going to see a lot of gross pictures. The question is here, is there any evidence at all, credible evidence? You used the word, at one point you said, there's no concrete evidence that my client did that. Concrete sounds like, well, we got some evidence, it just ain't dried yet, okay? You know, there's no credible evidence to show that my client was anywhere near this place. There's no credible evidence to show my client had anything to do with this, has ever been in that house before, or had any reason. Just hit home that there's no credible evidence of any of this stuff. You did try to make your client human. You did talk about it a little bit, and you did try to make him human. That was good. And I got no intro of self and team. All right, Stephen Harris, who's that? That was the first witness?
Stephanie Harrison.
Stephanie Harris, sorry. I can't hardly read my own writing. Stephanie Harrison, good voice. After I told you to speak up, and you knew your part very well. Send up so I can remember who you were. Knew your part very well. And you sounded believable. The attorney for that, who was that? Good voice, very professional looking and very professional sounding. Good questions. You can have a seat now. And at one point you said, now I want to go back up. I want to back up for just a second or for just a minute. That was good. But, I mean, just when I was getting excited about her, it ended. And I was kind of like left with, you know, out finish. You know, you just kind of stopped and she stopped too. Who cross-examined her? Nobody. That's right. You didn't ask any questions, and sometimes you don't need to. I mean, the last thing we heard from him was kind of a thud. So just let that resonate. So I thought that was good that you didn't ask him questions. Tyler McCann, my buddy. All right. Good voice, new part. And you spoke like a real witness would. He asked you a question, and you said, I just remember being cold. I just remember waking up at the hospital and a bunch of cops were talking to me. I mean, I can just see you shivering on that porch with that blanket around you. I can see you in the hospital while these damn cops around you, and almost all the witnesses took me back. I mean, you did things, and I'm going to try to talk about some of them, that real witnesses would do. You kind of look up, like you're remembering it. You know, you look down. You look at the witness, I mean, the questioner sometime, and you repeat the question. The attorney that crossed or directed him, okay. Good voice, good questions. And you ask the questions that I told you to ask. What happened after that? What happened after that? What happened then? Those are the type of questions you ask on direct examination. When you made an objection, it was a good, strong objection. And don't believe for 1 second that I ruled in this case the way I would in a real one. I ruled in this case to keep things going, to make things interesting, and because I want you to do things to get a grade. Defendant's attorney, who did that? All right. Good start. Oh, very good start. Tyler, I'm very sorry that you're going to have to answer these questions. You know, you're not the SOB that represents the other SOB. You know, you're a guy who's just trying to do his job. Tyler, I'm sorry you're going to have to go through this. And you called the person who committed this crime the intruder. The intruder. It's an intruder. I don't know who the hell that intruder was, but it was the intruder. Sure wasn't my client. And very good use of prior statement. You came up and cross-examined him on his prior statement. All right, Renee Shaw, who's that? Okay. You get the Academy Award. Good voice. You sounded real. One question was describe James McCain, and you said Jim was such and such. You know, that's how my wife would do it. Describe James Ammons. Well, she never calls me James, and she wouldn't say in court what she usually calls me. So she would say Jim was. I mean, it just sounded so real. I mean, you were very, very good, very real. Your voice cracked up. You know, I was looking for some real tissues. You know. You had and now I think I'm getting into the cross now. You had a great response to one of the questions on cross-examination, and then the attorney began to back off. And at the end, who directed? Once again, you did the...
I did the directing.
Okay. Well, still very professional, good questioning. Cross-examination was who? You? Me? You? All right. Now, you did do something. What did you do? You objected, and that was okay, but you needed better grounds. And I understand y'all don't know all the rules and regulations about objections, and I wasn't doing it like I really should have. Okay, now on to you. Great first question. You never met him. So you're just basing your answer, and I can't remember exactly what it was, you're just basing your answer on what someone else has told you. I mean, you set the stage right off. There's not a lot you can do to attack this poor woman. I mean, her son about got killed. But you do want to say, hey, ladies and gentlemen, things aren't exactly what they seem here. Very good. What does that say? Okay, then you were asking what seemed like useless questions, and they objected, but I think I overruled them. But then the questions got to the point. Lots of needless questions, and then you got to the point, which was, I can't remember. Then got to, I can't remember what it was. But there at the end.
She didn't know her husband as good as she thought she did.
Yeah, there at the end. I mean, the volleying back and forth between Renee and you, I mean, just was wonderful. You know, a couple of times, you know, I've sat in this courtroom thousands of times. I've sat in courtrooms tens of thousands of times and heard evidence. And occasionally, even though I know what we're doing here, I'm starting to get a little bit lost in listening to the witnesses and going, you know, hell, this is the way I listen to real witnesses, you know. And that's one reason I don't have such great notes, because sometimes I got caught up in it too. But I thought the volleying back and forth there, particularly at the end, was very good. Detective Scott, where is he? All right, very good voice, new part. You even have a badge and handcuffs. And by the way, the lady in the back wants her handcuffs back when you get through. We talked about arriving at the scene as if you were actually there. You talked about the house, just like you'd been through the house. And I assumed in your planning that y'all found the house because you had pictures. Those weren't crime scene pictures, were those actual crime scenes?
Yeah, those are actual crime scenes.
I figured that y'all found a house and that you actually went through a house and kind of planned this thing out.
But I gotta give them credit, they did draw the crime.
Okay. I knew that the interior crime scene pictures were probably from the original case, but I thought the exterior ones.
They were too.
Oh, wow.
Everything was
Okay.
from the original.
Well, you sounded to me like you'd been there. God ID. I don't know what that is. It must be good ID. Good ID at picture. I don't know what that means. Very good description of the type. Okay. And you added stuff too that he didn't ask you, which was good. Like at one point you said, oh, and by the way, he slept in the nude. Now, that was a question they didn't ask. They may have gotten to it, but as a good detective, a good law enforcement officer, you're telling what you know. Excellent presentation. And it was a great demo of the year. They got a verdict. Just tell them what they got. Tell them to smoke them if they got them. Great demo of the year print leaving. On tough examination, on tough cross-examination. Who did the cross-examination? She did tough cross-examination, and you sounded like a real cop. I mean, you sounded just like I've heard hundreds of cops before respond to tough examination. The attorney somebody objected about the ear on the door. Okay, that was a good objection. Now, who did the direct examination? You did. All right. But now you've seen them. You've calmed down, and you did much better on everything you did after this than you did on the opening. You had good questions, good setup on the examination of her. There was a little too much time between may I approach the bench and actually getting on with it, and I kind of felt like sometimes they were purposely delaying you to get you off track. I don't know whether they were or not. That's what I would have done if it had been real. But overall, I thought it was very good. On redirect, you did excellent redirect. You got 1 point out and clarified it, and you stopped. Okay. Defense attorney, who was the defense attorney on this one? Detective Scott?
I was.
All right. Good to ask. Well, no, I wouldn't use this. I got a mail. Somebody asked could they move during that thing, and that was good. Object to pictures. Nobody objected to any of these pictures. You could have, because technically they didn't do it the correct way. Can you identify these? Do you recognize these? How do you recognize these? Will they assist you in your examination? They didn't ask any of those questions, but once again, we're doing moot, not real. But a couple times y'all could have objected to pictures and you didn't. Defendant's attorney on cross, that's you. Good questions. Training and, you talked about training as an artist. Did you have any training as an artist? That was good. but bad follow-up. You asked the question you shouldn't have asked. Is it normal for this to happen? Is it normal for somebody with no training in how to draw a picture, do a crime scene sketch, and introduce it? Hell yeah, it happens all the time. It happens in every murder case, because none of these people know how to draw. So you had a good question, but you followed it up with one that you shouldn't have asked. One too many questions. Good exam of the detective, good cross-examination of the detective in the pictures. Roger Miller. Regina Miller, sorry. Good, knew your part, good description of the crime scene, great eye contact with the jury. I mean, I don't think you looked at them very much at all. You looked at the jury the whole time. And you didn't do it fakely. You know, of course it was fake, but you weren't fake at being fake, you know. And you answered one question. I liked your answer. I'm not qualified to answer that. And that's exactly what an expert would do when they don't know or they're not qualified. The attorney who directly examined you was very good. You just kept getting better and better as we went along. Defense who crossed, good cross using something. Good voice, good questions. My defendant. You don't say my defendant. My client. My client. Dr. Amy, somebody.
Hamilton.
Yeah. Do you want them to come in and listen to this, or are they all right back there, Wendy?
They're done. They've reached their way.
Yeah, just have them come on in, and just tell them to be quiet as they come in. We'll get to the verdict in just a minute. Dr. Amy Hamilton, somebody? All right. You knew your part. Good answers. You sounded like a doctor. Crush fracture. Something else, and skull. I mean, you just sounded like a doctor. Good something, good something else. Defensive wounds, you talked about that. And they kept asking you so many questions on direct and cross-examination that I swear, I know you used up every bit of medical knowledge that you'd studied for this. Because you just kept going. I mean, I thought that we're going to get to the end, and you know, because you're not a doctor, I don't guess, are you?
Not yet.
But you just kept going. The attorney who directed her.
I did,
Okay. Good qualification of an expert. But you don't give the jury a big document. Don't give the jury a big document unless you got a bunch of them. Plus, in this scenario, I didn't want them to be distracted by that. A big document like that, you have copies for everybody. Great something. Oh, great direct. You had a plan and a purpose, and you went after it. I mean, and in all the directs you did almost all the experts, didn't you?
Yes.
All right. I mean, it was obvious you had practiced and knew what you were doing. The attorney who crossed. Good cross. You got hung up on the no metal, though. And it took her a while to catch on to say, well, you know, one of the reasons I know it was metal because there's no fragments. You know, it obviously was something hard, and it didn't leave any fragments. It wasn't a rusty pipe. It wasn't a bat. It wasn't anything that could leave wood fibers. And you can't object just because you don't like what the answer is. Although it was entertaining. And you look confused. And that's good sometimes. You know, you got a witness on the witness stand, you're going, I don't understand. So you're secretly saying to them, I bet y'all don't understand either. You look confused, and then you put your hand to your head, you know. Michael Grubb. Very good, very knowledgeable. Who directed him? Once again, good qualification of an expert, good presentation, great exam. Great cross. Who did the cross on that? I thought that was a great cross. Something. I don't know what that says. What? I don't know. Cornelius Vanderloop. You were a little nervous, but then you got into your part. You knew it well. I thought you did a very good job. Who directed him? Once again, good cross. I mean, good direct. Got your points across. No, okay. No, that was the cross. Who did the cross? All right. Very good cross. Got your points across, and then you shut up. You didn't keep going. And I see professional attorneys every day go too far in cross-examination. I got this. All I'm saying here on these is ditto on you. From the last one you examined. All right, Aaron Miller. Who's that?
You mean Alan?
Somebody Miller. Aaron Allen. Yeah. Detective. Yeah, detective. Where's our detective? Okay.
Alan was the last one. It's Detective Alan.
Good job. Good job. Good knowledge. Good job. Good knowledge. Good demeanor. You were saying a lot of objectionable stuff. Nobody objected.
I was. That's like
All right, and who examined her? Who examined her? I got good exam, cross exam, cross exam. I got good job. You kept after her, which I liked. I like that. Kept after her. Dr. Curley. Hey, sweetie. You're looking good for 72. All right. Now, the way she started out, I'm the real bones. Believe me, in real life, that might happen. It absolutely, positively might happen. You might get some expert up here who knows in their own heart and mind that they know everything. They have more combined knowledge than everybody in the courtroom. I mean, you will hear stuff just like that in a real courtroom. You did something very well. Oh, you sounded very, very real. And who was the defense attorney on her? Okay. I worked very, very, very good. Y'all must have practiced a lot. Yeah, okay. William, somebody. Who's William? You sounded very professional. You talked just like a cop. I mean, I could just see you in a prior life being a cop. Were you? Were you a cop in a prior?
Yeah, 20 years FBI.
Yeah. All right, I believed it when you said yeah. You went too far when you had the FBI stuff. You know? All right, who did the cross on them? On him. Very excellent, but help. Okay, you did an excellent cross-examination of tearing him down, but everything you did tore down your own case. That this ear print stuff is just total BS. Okay, but you still did an excellent cross of him. I mean, this case is just not designed. I mean, I know it's a real case. I know that the person was convicted, but I mean, there's no evidence here for the state. You tried this case 100 times in moot court in a law school, and 90% of the time the defendant gets acquitted. And we're going to get to y'all in just 1 second. All right.
we're the ones trying to make it into something that.
All right. Who's Ernest? Ernest Hamilton. Ham. Good voice, very knowledgeable. You knew your part. You even had hand gestures. You know, it's not real. So I can see you sitting up there talking, and even knowing your parts. But y'all didn't just do that. Every one of you were actors. I mean, you did things with your hands, you did things with your head, you moved. I mean, you acted like real people. I thought it was very, very believable. You sounded very professional. There was no objection when there should have been a bunch, but that's all right. The DA on that, very good. Who was that?
Direct exam on Ham.
Yeah, very good cross. You got your points out, and once again, you got out. I put that this was a very good direct. Who did the direct to him? Very good direct. You had good flow, and you did something else. That was good. I can't remember what. I can't read this. Mosine. Who's that? Mosin. Okay, Mosin. Very, very good voice. You were very confident. You knew your part. Whoever questioned you, very good questions. Cross-examination. Good questions, but we cut it short. And a lot of this stuff, Wendy was cutting short, and I was cutting short because we were trying to get through by 5 o'clock, which we didn't make. Delco, who's Delco? Delker. Very believable. You looked up. Where are you? Yeah, right there. You looked up and you looked down, and I could just see you remembering what had happened. I mean, it was very, very really believable. You looked back at the lawyers. You looked like you were looking back in your mind to remember what had happened. Whoever did the direct, I got good direct. You got your info, but you didn't. Who was that? You didn't ask the ultimate question. The ultimate question, when you were talking about the cars, was my client either of those two men you saw by that truck? Yeah. Okay. You missed a point that they could hammer home real good in closing. And then the defendant. Where's the defendant? I thought you were very real acting. Okay. I mean, that's exactly the way a defendant would act. You know, get up there and you act like you don't really know anything. You know, and she did. You did him, right? Mm-hmm. You did an excellent job, and y'all let her do an excellent job. I mean, he hardly said anything other than yes and no, except when he got to the parts. And even if you had objected, I probably would have overruled it. Good cross. Whoever did that was good cross. Okay. Closing. I caught you off guard because we're trying to push, and you got a little flustered there. There's nothing wrong with taking your notes over, but you used emotion, and that's all you got. I mean, you had to use emotion. That was good because you really got nothing else. there was not one witness who can exclude my defendant. Well, now you're going into their hands. We can't exclude the defendant. Well, I mean, that's pretty much what this case is. There's just not much there. But you did a very good job with not very much. You talked about motive, opportunity, and you really talked, although you didn't use this word, you talked about inclination. You know, the one thing that you missed is, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, how did all of these things come together in this entire universe today? How did all of this come together? The ear print that could have been made by him. His ex-wife is dating this man, bludgeoned to death. He's within 3 miles. There's one connecting factor. In all the universe, it has to be one connecting factor, and that's him. That's the only way that all of these circumstances could have possibly come together, and that's your only hope, because it's a completely circumstantial case, which can be won. And the last one, closing, who did that? First thing you did was you got up and you diffused the emotional argument, because that's very powerful. That was very good. And then you talked about excluding him, put exclusion to the jury. Oh, you put the jury in your client's place. You know, maybe some of y'all couldn't have been excluded. Puts in their mind, golly, you know, I could be sitting right there too on this same kind of evidence. And do I really want to be found guilty of murder because my ear is similar to some smudge on a door? So I thought that was very good. All right, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, who's the foreperson? All right, stand up. What say ye? Do we hang him now or do we hang him later?
Not guilty on all cases.
Not guilty on all counts. All right, I'm going to give the jurors a chance to talk to you a little bit too. I know we're running over a little bit.
Yeah, I won't keep you long, but I got to say
Once
a big
again,
thank you.
Thank you. I want to say two things. First of all, the good news and the bad news is the same to me. All right? Y'all did as good or better than many of the lawyers I see in front of me every week. I mean, it's hard for me to believe every time I do this that we're not actually a law school class. It's hard for me to believe that y'all get this good and can do this well and be this immersed in an undergraduate class. And although she never listens to me, I think every one of you deserves an A.
Yeah. I also want to thank our jury because, guys, these are your faculty and staff who took time out of their schedule to volunteer to do this. I want to thank them. To tell you what a tradition this has become, I've got alumni in here. Marissa and Josh and Ryan, they've all sat at these tables. They have done this mock trial. In fact, you did it twice. You did once. Did you do it once or twice? Twice. And now they have, it's kind of exciting because now Josh and Ryan are attorneys. And Marissa will be going to law school in the fall at Elon University. So it's exciting. I also want to thank the communications department because this is great that they have come here, set up the cameras, done a video, so that next week we get to see you guys. So you get to learn. But I am really proud of you. I know a lot of work went into this. And I know the big question that I always get asked is what? Are we going to have a final? No, you do not have to have a So I want to say good job. And I want to say to anybody on the jury, do you guys want to mind, anybody want to make comments? Any comments?
Good job.
Any memories you guys want to share? Or? You both smiled when he said attorneys, because you're in the courtroom.
Oh, I mean, it's true. They did a lot better than unfortunately, than some of our colleagues do on a daily basis.
I'd echo that as well. It's amazing to see people with, experience in law school and courtroom experience and the job y'all guys did, and y'all surpassed them. So, quite good to see.
But if you want individual comments, absolutely come ask us, and I think we know what we want to do.
Okay, so Chief Phillips, what do you think they do?
They did a fantastic job on a difficult case with very limited availability of evidence for the state and a lot of time constraints. So everybody just did a magnificent job.
I also want to thank Dr. Kathy Brown. She's the reason we have this case. It is an actual case. Every witness literally was in this case. The pictures they showed guys did what you would get if you were a DA. Here it is, run with it. And in the real state of Washington, this guy was convicted just based on the evidence that was presented today. He sat in jail for 5 years till the Washington Court of Appeals said, we don't think that ear prints are an accepted forensic science. So he was released, and the crime has never been solved. Never been solved.
Where's the fiance?
The fiance actually.
We've been asking that the whole time.
Let me tell you how crazy and how fun this is. Miss Jeannie there just happened to have to go to Washington State to visit her family. She goes, I'm at the courthouse. I said, get every record you can. You can imagine the accounting office at Methodist loves me right now. I gave the clerk's office my P card, said, let her have it. She never gave a statement. She never testified. It was amazing. There were very few things in the actual trial. I mean, how many documents did you go through, Jeannie?
Oh my gosh, I went there for over 6 hours going through stuff for this case.
Yeah, it was not
a lot of useless information too, just like.
Yeah, it was, and because I was looking for it, and it was not there. She didn't even give it. I don't think we found any statements. Nothing.
Actually, yeah. Can I ask how long the actual trial occurred? What was the length of time?
I think it was like a year and a half.
But it took about the duration.
Thank
It took about 2 weeks.
Okay.
A week. But they had every witness you guys saw.
Okay.
Literally.
Actually, they had two parts of the case. They had where in Washington State they have to meet the Frye standard for scientific like the admissibility in court. In the Frye part of the case, they actually included Moenson's and a lot of the expert witnesses that you saw in the defense's side. But in the actual case itself, they did not include that. So that probably contributed to Wayne Coonsey being actually guilty of the crime.
The only other evidence the prosecutors had in the real case was while he was sitting in jail. Supposedly his cellmate said, he told me he did it. And then he got on the witness stand and, you know, that goes on. And other than that, I mean, it didn't, and I'm actually an attorney from Washington State, so it's fun to go through all this and go, oh my God. I also have to say that I felt really bad for Sean, who was your big detective. This is unusual, and because in every other case, each individual detective has a statement that they've done. Oh no, in Washington State, the lead detective does them all. She takes everything and puts it in that one big document. So she, it was like, she literally, this detective wrote everything.
And I read every case too.
Yeah. So it was really, I was like, I can't imagine. So, and we have another guest, I'm going to embarrass him, Errol. Jarman is here, and he is actually with the SBI. So what comments, what do you think?
I was here a little bit late, but I saw a lot of positive things coming out of this class. This is a great learning experience. I can tell you, I've sat in Judge Ammons' courtroom with a jury trial, and he lets you run like it's a real jury. So this is a great learning experience for you. Saw a lot of good testimony from the stand. One thing that I would point out that we learn professionally is when you're on the stand, you may want to make it a point. I saw this today as a positive. Look at your jury. Talk to your jury. You've got a story. It's the truth. You want the jury to believe it. So look at them. Talk with them. Look at your counsel, and then turn to the jury. The only other thing that I can add, and I didn't see this today, maybe one time, when a defense attorney is asking you questions and you're a cop, just make sure you don't get into a sparring situation. That will make the jury seem like you got something to hide. So just make sure you keep it professional. Sometimes defense attorneys will try to take it there. Just don't go there.
Any comments on the jury? Marissa's like, God, I'm going to do this and all this good stuff.
Wendy, I also want to thank the courthouse staff here who makes this possible, Ms. Hancock. And they can't leave until we all leave. So, anything else?